The Amish have mastered something modern society has almost forgotten: keeping food fresh for decades. Without electricity, without fancy technology, just pure, old-fashioned wisdom. Imagine having a meal today that was prepared years ago. Sounds impossible, right? But for the Amish, it's just another part of life. While most people panic when their fridge stops working, the Amish don't even need one. They've been preserving food for centuries, long before freezers and canned goods filled supermarket shelves. They know how to make food last, not just for a few months, but for decades. Let's dive into their fascinating techniques. Root cellars, a secret underground pantry. Imagine stepping down into the cool earth, where rows of wooden shelves hold fresh vegetables that were harvested years ago. No mold, no rot, just crisp, perfectly stored food. This is the magic of the Amish root cellar. It's not fancy, just a deep hole in the ground, covered with a wooden or stone structure. But it works. The earth keeps everything cool like a natural refrigerator. No electricity needed. Potatoes, carrots, apples, beets, they all go here, packed in sand, straw, or sawdust. Some are even buried in barrels, hidden from moisture and pests. The cold, damp air stops them from drying out, keeps them fresh. Some Amish families eat potatoes that were harvested 3 years ago. Sounds crazy? Not to them. But it's not just veggies. Some root cellars store smoked meats, butter in clay pots, even fresh milk kept in sealed stone jugs. Yes, fresh milk. It stays good for months if done right. The key is the right balance of humidity and airflow. Too much moisture? Mold. Too dry? Everything shrivels up. That's why the Amish build their root cellars deep underground, where temperatures remain steady all year long. Some cellars are over 100 years old, still working like a charm. Canning, a time capsule of freshness. Rows of gleaming glass jars, filled with vibrant colors. Red tomatoes, golden peaches, green beans, deep purple beets. A feast sealed in time. This is how the Amish keep food fresh for decades. Canning is their lifeline. It starts with fresh food, harvested at its peak. No waiting, no wasting. Straight from the garden to the jar. Vegetables are boiled, meats are pressure cooked, fruits are sealed with sugar syrup. Every jar is sterilized, the lids tightened, then stored away in a cool, dark cellar. It's an art. It's a science. One mistake, and the food is ruined. But done right? A jar of Amish canned chicken from 15 years ago can taste as fresh as the day it was packed. They've mastered it. No preservatives, no chemicals. Just food, sealed and safe. Some families pass down canned goods through generations. Imagine opening a jar of pickles made by your grandmother 20 years ago. Still crunchy. Still delicious. That's the power of Amish canning. Smoking meat, turning time into flavor. Step into an Amish smokehouse and you're stepping into history. The air is thick with the rich, deep scent of smoldering hickory or applewood. Strips of meat hang from the rafters, their surfaces darkened, glistening with flavor. This is preservation at its finest. They take fresh cuts of beef, pork, even fish. Salt them, sometimes sugar too. Then let them sit. Days, maybe weeks. The salt draws out moisture, making it nearly impossible for bacteria to grow. Then, they hang the meat in the smokehouse, letting the slow burning would do its magic. Hours turn into days. Smoke seeps into every fiber, creating a barrier against rot. The result? Meat that can last for years. Literally years. Some Amish families eat smoke hams that have been hanging in their cellars for over a decade. But here's the real trick. After smoking, they coat the meat in lard. A thick, protective shell of fat. No air gets in, no bacteria either. Just meat, safe and ready to eat. No fridge, no freezer. Just time-tested wisdom. Salt curing. Meat that lasts a lifetime. Before refrigeration, salt was gold. It preserved everything. The Amish still use it like their ancestors did. A slab of pork completely buried in coarse salt. Weeks later, they pull it out, rinse it, hang it to dry. That's it. That's all it takes to make meat last for years. Salt pulls moisture out, making the meat dry and firm. No moisture means no bacteria. It's that simple. Some families take it a step further, coating the cured meat in beeswax, sealing in freshness even longer. A well-cured ham? 20 years. Still edible. Still safe. The Amish don't waste. Every scrap of meat is used. Sausages are made from scraps, packed in salt, hung to dry. They make jerky that lasts for decades. When it's time to eat, they soak the meat in water, rehydrating it before cooking, like it was never preserved at all. Fermentation, turning food into superfood. If you open an Amish root cellar, you'll see shelves of bubbling jars, fermented cabbage, pickles, beets, even dairy. Fermentation isn't just about preservation. It makes food healthier, packed with probiotics. Sauerkraut is a staple. Just shredded cabbage and salt. No vinegar. No preservatives. The natural bacteria do all the work. After a few weeks, it's ready. After a few years, still perfect. Some Amish sauerkraut has been stored for over 20 years, and it's still good. Milk is fermented into kefir. Cream into butter, stored in earthen jars. Cheese, aged for decades, covered in wax to keep it from drying out. Everything has a place. Everything lasts. Drying and dehydration. The simplicity of removing water. The Amish don't throw food away. Ever. If they have too many apples, they dry them. If there's extra corn, they turn it into meal. Vegetables, herbs, even meats, they dry everything. Sometimes in the sun. Sometimes in a smokehouse. Sometimes in a warm attic with constant airflow. No electricity needed. No fancy gadgets. Just patience. Dried food can last for decades if stored right. No moisture. No bacteria. Just food, waiting to be eaten. Jerky is a favorite. Strips of beef, dried until tough and chewy. Stored in cloth bags. Lasts forever. Almost. And here's a trick. Dried beans? They last indefinitely. The Amish store them in barrels, in dark, cool places. 50 years later? Still good. The Amish way. More than just preserving food. For the Amish, food storage isn't just about survival. It's a way of life, a connection to the past, a promise to the future. They don't do it because they have to. They do it because it's the way things have always been done. It's about discipline, about respect for nature, about never wasting a single grain, a single vegetable, a single drop of milk. They grow their own food. They harvest it by hand. They store it with care. They take pride in knowing that no matter what happens, bad weather, economic crashes, even complete power failures, their families will never go hungry. Their pantries are full, their root cellars stocked, their smokehouses lined with preserved meats. But here's the thing. They don't hoard food in fear. They share. They trade. They teach each other. Knowledge is passed down generation after generation. A 12-year-old Amish child knows more about food preservation than most adults today. That's not an exaggeration. It's the truth. And maybe we should start paying attention. Lard sealing, the forgotten food vault. Ever heard of meat being stored in a jar of fat? Sounds odd, right? But the Amish have been doing it forever. It's called lard sealing, and it works like magic. Cooked meats, sausage, bacon, even whole chunks of ham, are packed into earthenware jars. Then hot, melted lard is poured over them. The fat hardens, forming a thick, protective barrier that keeps air and bacteria out. No oxygen means no spoilage, no mold, no decay. When it's time to eat, they just scoop out the meat, scrape off the lard, and cook it. Tastes fresh, as if it was made yesterday. Some jars of lard sealed meat have been stored for 30 years. Yes, 30 years, and they're still perfectly edible. It's not just meat. Butter is stored this way too. The Amish make what they call potted butter. Fresh cream is churned into butter, then packed into jars and sealed under layers of melted fat. In the root cellar, away from heat and light, it lasts for decades. No refrigeration needed. Think about that for a moment. In a world where butter goes bad in weeks, the Amish are eating butter made 15 years ago. Clay pot cooling. The Amish refrigerator without power. Ever heard of a Zaire pot? It's an ancient cooling system used for thousands of years. The Amish use something similar. It's just a clay pot, but it can keep food fresh for weeks, sometimes months. Here's how it works. A big clay pot is filled with wet sand. A smaller pot is placed inside, holding the food. As the water in the sand evaporates, it cools the inner pot. The effect? Natural refrigeration. No electricity. No moving parts. Just simple science. Milk stays fresh. Vegetables crisp. Butter firm. Even meats last longer. This method isn't high-tech. It's not expensive, but it's powerful. In Amish homes, these cooling pots sit in shady corners, keeping food safe long after it would have spoiled in a normal kitchen. And when winter comes, the underground root cellar takes over. A cycle as old as time. Pickling. When vinegar becomes a time machine. The Amish love pickling. It's one of their most reliable food preservation techniques. And it's not just cucumbers. They pickle everything: beets, carrots, green beans, eggs, even meat. The secret? Vinegar. It's not just for flavor. It's a natural preservative. It stops bacteria in its tracks, keeps food from spoiling, makes it last for decades. Yes, decades. Walk into an Amish pantry, and you'll see shelves lined with pickled everything. Jars filled with golden brine. Vegetables floating inside, waiting to be eaten. Some of those jars, 20 years old, still crisp, still good. Pickled eggs, sealed in jars of vinegar and spices, last for years. Pickled pork, packed in salt and vinegar, can stay edible for more than a decade. No fridge, no problem. Pickling isn't just about storage. It's about flavor. Over time, the food soaks in the tangy, salty goodness, getting better with age. It's like aging wine, but instead of a bottle in a cellar, it's a jar of beets in an Amish farmhouse. Grain storage, the foundation of Amish food security. Grain is life. At least for the Amish, it is. Wheat, corn, oats, barley. These are the backbone of their diet. They store grains like gold, carefully, precisely, because if stored correctly, grains can last for more than 50 years. The secret? Airtight barrels, metal or thick wood, lined with food-safe plastic or sealed with beeswax. No air, no moisture, no pests, just perfect, untouched grain. Some families go even further. They use diatomaceous earth, a natural, powdery substance that kills insects but is safe for humans, to keep bugs out of their grain supplies. Others mix dried bay leaves into their barrels, a natural insect repellent. In the old days, before plastic and metal, the Amish used ceramic crocks and buried them in the earth. A cool, dry place where grains could last for generations. And today, some still do it. Why fix what isn't broken? When they need flour, they don't buy it. They grind it themselves. Fresh, nutritious, no preservatives, no chemicals, just pure wholemeal grain, bread made from it, unlike anything store-bought. Rich, hearty, packed with the energy of real food. Survival bread, the Amish hardtack that lasts a lifetime. Ever heard of hardtack? It's a simple bread, just flour, water, salt. That's it, baked until rock hard, stored in a dry place. It lasts forever. Literally. The Amish make it in large batches, stack it in airtight containers. Decades later, still good. Just soak it in milk, broth, or coffee, and it softens right up. Soldiers used to live off this stuff. The Amish still do. Hardtack is survival food, emergency food, a backup when all else fails. No fridge needed, no special care, just a dry, cool place to sit. And wait. Final thoughts. Why the Amish never worry about food shortages. The world changes. Economies crash. Power grids fail. But the Amish? They keep going. Their food security doesn't depend on supermarkets or electricity. It depends on knowledge, on skills, on wisdom passed down for centuries. They don't fear empty shelves. Their shelves are always full, packed with smoked meats, dried vegetables, canned fruits, pickled eggs, and aged cheeses. If disaster strikes tomorrow, they're ready. If nothing happens, they just keep living as they always have. Maybe we should take a lesson from them. Maybe we should start thinking about how we store food, how we rely too much on technology, how we've forgotten the simple, powerful ways to keep food fresh without a fridge. The Amish haven't forgotten. They never will. And because of that, they'll always have food, no matter what.